I thought I had finally found the one person in the world who truly understood me. For 6 months, she was my rock, my secret keeper, and my closest confidant. But I didn't realize that while I was pouring my heart out into a glowing screen, a pair of real eyes was watching me from the shadows just a few yards away. What I discovered behind that profile picture didn't just break my trust, it chilled me to the bone. Before we dive into this journey, please subscribe to the channel and join our community. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever felt like someone online was too good to be true? Let me know in the comments below. For as long as I can remember, I've been a bit of a loner. At 22, most people my age are out at crowded bars, navigating complex social circles, or documenting every loud moment of their lives on camera. But I always felt like an outsider looking in, a quiet observer of a world that seemed too fast and too noisy. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood where the houses are spaced just far enough apart to feel private, yet close enough that you can hear the rhythmic hum of a neighbor's lawnmower on a Sunday morning or the distant bark of a dog 3 streets over. My life was a predictable cycle: work, a hot cup of herbal tea, and the comforting blue glow of my laptop. I wasn't looking for love, and I certainly wasn't looking for trouble. I was just looking for a friend, someone who spoke my language, someone who wouldn't judge the quiet corners of my mind, or the fact that I preferred a book to a party. That's when I met Sophie on a niche social media platform dedicated to film photography and obscure poetry. Her profile was like a breath of fresh air. It featured a girl who looked to be exactly my age, with kind, expressive eyes and a gentle smile that seemed to suggest she knew exactly what it felt like to be lonely in a crowded room. Her bio was simple: capturing the beauty in the mundane. We started talking over a shared interest in vintage film cameras, the heavy, mechanical feel of an old Leica, and the way light leaks can turn a mistake into a masterpiece. But the conversation quickly spiraled into something much deeper than just technical specifications. Within a week, we were messaging every single day, from the moment I woke up until my eyes grew heavy at night. She lived in a different country, somewhere in Europe, she said, which made the distance feel like a safety net. In my mind, the thousands of miles between us meant I didn't have to worry about the sudden pressure of a face-to-face meeting or the anxiety of real-world social expectations. I could just be myself, raw and unfiltered. Sophie was everything I felt I lacked. She was confident, seemingly worldly, and possessed an incredibly intuitive nature. It was as if she could sense the subtle shifts in my mood just by the cadence of my typing or the length of my pauses between messages. If I had a grueling day at my office job, dealing with demanding clients and cold coffee, she knew exactly the right words to say to make me feel empowered and understood. If I felt a sudden wave of anxiety about where my life was headed, she would walk me through it with a maturity and wisdom that was rare for someone our age. I started to rely on her for everything. She became the person I shared my morning coffee with via a photo, and the person I whispered my midnight thoughts to. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen. I felt heard in a way my own family couldn't manage. I didn't realize then that being seen was far more literal and far more terrifying than I could have ever imagined. As the months passed, my bond with Sophie grew into something inseparable, a digital lifeline that I clung to with everything I had. I shared things with her that I had never dared to tell a soul. Not my parents, who always seemed too busy with their own lives, nor the few casual acquaintances I had managed to keep from my college years. I told her about my childhood fears of the dark, my secret recurring dreams of moving to a small cabin on the coast where I could just paint and breathe, and even the small, mundane details of my daily life that most people would find boring. I would often send her photos of my world, the specific brand of tea I was drinking, the way the light hit the dusty bookshelf in my room, or a new blue sweater I had bought because it made me feel a little more brave. She would always respond with such warmth and detail, describing how much she wished she could be right there with me, sitting on my porch, wrapped in a blanket, and talking until the stars faded into the dawn. There was a strange, intoxicating comfort in her digital presence. Because she was thousands of miles away, I felt there was absolutely no risk in being completely vulnerable. I felt protected by the screen. She told me elaborate stories about her life in Europe, describing the ancient cobblestone streets of her neighborhood, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery downstairs, and the quiet, rainy afternoons she spent tucked away in cozy cafes. She sent me photos of herself, too, candid shots of her laughing at a festival, looking thoughtful while reading, or walking through a park. Looking back now, I noticed they were always slightly grainy, always had a bit of a soft filter. But I lived in a generation of filters and low-resolution aesthetics. I never questioned it for a second. I was too wrapped up in the emotional support she provided. She helped me navigate a particularly difficult breakup with a guy who had never really cared. And she was the one who pushed me to finally ask for the promotion I deserved at work. She was my mentor, my sister, and my best friend all rolled into one. However, amidst this digital bliss, there was always one small nagging feeling in the physical world, though at the time I never connected it to Sophie. It was my neighbor. He lived in a house directly across the narrow alleyway from my bedroom window. He was a man in his late 50s, solitary, and almost entirely silent. We rarely saw him outside, except for the few moments it took to take out his trash or retrieve a stack of mail. He never waved, never offered a neighborly smile, and never spoke a word to anyone on the block. But often, when I was sitting at my desk late at night, pouring my heart out to Sophie, I would feel a sudden, cold prickle on the back of my neck. I'd glance out the window and see him standing there in the darkness of his own home, a faint silhouette behind his thin, yellowed curtains, looking straight toward my house. I always brushed it off as my own overactive imagination, or the typical paranoia of living alone. I told myself he was just a lonely old man with nothing better to do. I had Sophie to protect my spirit. I didn't need to worry about a strange neighbor in the shadows. I had no idea that the friend I was talking to and the man in the window were part of the same nightmare.
Part 3. The 6-month mark of our friendship was approaching, and I wanted to do something special to celebrate the person who had changed my life. I had mentioned to Sophie that I was struggling with a complex creative project, a series of illustrations I wanted to publish, and she had spent hours on the phone, always through text-based apps, never once a voice call, helping me brainstorm and refine my ideas. She seemed to know the layout of my room by heart, the names of my childhood pets I had mentioned months ago, and the exact time I usually turned off my lights to sleep. She was so ingrained in my life that I started to feel like she was a part of me, a second conscience. I felt like I owed her every ounce of my recent happiness. I would tell her, "I don't know what I'd do without you." And she would reply, "You'll never have to find out." At the time, it felt sweet. Now, it feels like a threat. One evening, while we were chatting about my day, a strange and subtle glitch happened in our conversation. I had sent her a photo of a new painting I was working on, a landscape of a forest in the rain. She replied almost instantly, "The lighting in your room looks so much better now that you moved that floor lamp to the left corner. It really helps the colors pop." I froze, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I slowly scrolled back and looked at the photo I had just sent. The lamp wasn't in the frame. In fact, you couldn't even see that specific corner of my room in the image. The camera had been focused tightly on the canvas. My heart did a slow, heavy thud against my ribs, like a warning drum. I typed back, "How did you know I moved the lamp? I didn't take a picture of that." There was a long, agonizing pause. The 3 dots appeared, danced for a while, and then disappeared. Finally, she replied, "You mentioned it yesterday, silly. Don't you remember? You said the shadows were bothering you while you were sketching." I felt a wave of confusion. I searched through our entire chat history, scrolling back through days of messages. I searched for the word lamp, lighting, and corner. Nothing came up, not a single mention. I felt a physical coldness wash over me, a chill that made me shiver despite the warmth of the room. But I quickly suppressed the fear. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her, because the alternative was too terrifying to contemplate. I told myself I was just tired, that I must have mentioned it in a flurry of messages and simply forgotten. Or perhaps we had talked about it in a way I couldn't find. But the seed of doubt had been planted in the fertile soil of my mind. It was a tiny, sharp thing that began to grow in the dark. I started noticing other small, impossible things. How she knew it was raining at my house before I even told her, or how she knew I was wearing my blue sweater when I hadn't taken any photos that day. She was always one step ahead of my reality.
Part 4. The breaking point finally came on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I had stayed home from work with a lingering fever and a pounding headache, and the house felt deathly silent, the kind of silence that makes you hear every creak of the floorboards. I was lying in bed, aimlessly scrolling through my social media feed, when I saw a notification from a local neighborhood watch app. Someone had posted a warning about a suspicious device found in the bushes of the local park just a few blocks away. It got me thinking about digital security and privacy, topics I usually ignored because I thought I had nothing to hide. On a sudden, unexplained whim, driven by a gut instinct I couldn't ignore any longer, I took the most recent profile picture Sophie had sent me, a bright photo of her at what she called a local harvest festival, and ran it through a high-end reverse image search tool. My breath hitched in my throat, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. The photo wasn't of a girl named Sophie living a picturesque life in Europe. It was a stock photo from a lifestyle blog published in 2018 by a photographer in California. My hands started to shake so violently that I nearly dropped my phone. I ran another photo she had sent me, then another. They were all from different, disconnected corners of the internet. Old Instagram accounts of girls from South America, random Pinterest boards for aesthetic inspiration, and clearly AI-generated portraits that looked perfect but lacked a soul. Sophie didn't exist. The person I had shared my deepest soul with, the person who knew my shames, my dreams, and my daily habits, was a ghost, a carefully constructed fiction designed to reel me in. Dread, thick and oily like engine grease, pooled in the pit of my stomach. If Sophie wasn't a 22-year-old girl in another country, then who had I been talking to for the last 6 months? Who was the person who knew about the lamp in the corner of my room and the color of the sweater I was wearing? I stood up, my legs feeling like lead, and walked over to my window. I moved the curtain just an inch and looked across the narrow alley. The neighbor's house looked as lifeless and gray as ever, but then my eyes caught something in his second-story window. On his windowsill, partially hidden by the shriveled leaves of a dying potted plant, was a high-powered telescope, and next to it, resting on a sturdy professional tripod, was a high-end camera with a massive telephoto lens. It wasn't pointed at the sky. It was pointed directly, with terrifying precision, at my desk where I sat every night to talk to my best friend. Part 5. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the chest, knocking the air out of my lungs. I didn't wait to see if he was watching me right then. I retreated into the hallway, my heart racing so fast I thought I might faint. I called the police, my voice trembling and cracking as I tried to explain that I believed I was being stalked by the man across the alley. I told them about the friend online and the camera in the window. When the officers arrived and knocked on his heavy wooden door, I watched through the peephole of my own front door, my body cold with sweat. The man, the 50-year-old neighbor I had always felt uneasy about, opened the door looking disheveled, blinking in the daylight like a mole. But when the police obtained permission to search his home, they found the sickening truth. It wasn't just the cameras and the telescope. They found a laptop that was still logged into the Sophie profile, the screen filled with our most recent messages. They found folders on his hard drive filled with thousands of photos of me working, me sleeping, me changing my clothes, me crying after the breakup he helped me through. He had been using sophisticated voice-to-text AI and language models to maintain the persona of a young woman, and he had been watching me through his lens every single night to gather the details that made his lies feel so real. He wasn't some criminal mastermind. He was a lonely, broken, and deeply disturbed man who had turned my private life into his own personal, interactive reality show. Every encouraging word he sent was fueled by the voyeuristic pleasure of watching me from the shadows just 30 feet away. The friendship was nothing more than a trap to keep me opening up, to keep me vulnerable, while he fed on my secrets. He was eventually charged with stalking, harassment, and several counts of privacy invasion. I moved out of that house within the week, leaving behind most of my furniture because I couldn't stand to look at anything those eyes might have seen. I'm sharing this today because I want you to understand how easy it is to be deceived. We live in an era where connection is effortless, but true safety is incredibly fragile. I gave my heart to a screen because I was lonely, and I forgot that behind that screen, there isn't always a person who cares for you. In the age of AI and digital masks, anyone can be anything they want to be. They can mirror your emotions, learn your habits, and become your perfect companion while harboring the darkest, most twisted intentions. Please be careful. Do not give your whole self to someone you haven't looked in the eye in the physical, breathing world. Your secrets are precious. Do not hand them to a stranger who might be watching you from the shadows. Stay safe, stay skeptical, and never let your guard down entirely. Your life is not a show for someone else to watch.